Hello, and welcome to another Mission Domain live engagement at this year's Warfare Symposium. The topic today is Joint All-Domain Command and Control Advanced Battle Management System in yet another panel covering that very important topic. I'm Lieutenant General J.T. Thompson, Commander of the Space Force's Space and Missile Systems Center out here in sunny Southern California. On my day-to-day job, I'm honored to work with the greatest space acquisition team on the planet as we develop, acquire, launch, and sustain the world's premier national security space systems. A big thanks to Lieutenant General Retired Orville Wright and the whole AFA team for organizing this event. And thanks to all of you who are online joining us today. 2020 was, of course, a really challenging year as we all adjusted our operations to function during the COVID-19 pandemic. From shifting to a telework environment to rapidly embracing new technologies for remote collaboration, I'm really proud of the flexibility, agility, and ingenuity of our military personnel, our government civilians, and all of our partners in industry to keep our vital national security space programs on track. And I'm really excited to see what great things we're able to achieve together in 2021. As a note to our audience, this is an interactive panel, so please use the Q&A buttons on your screens to send your questions into the panel as we execute. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and we've got some stellar folks lined up to discuss this vitally important ABMS and JADC2 issue. From Boeing, we have Mr. Mark Rasnake, multi-domain ABMS program lead. From Northrop Grumman, we have retired Brigadier General Scott Stapp, Corporate Vice President and Chief Technology Officer. And from General Atomics Aeronautical Systems, Dr. Matt Cornick, Director of Advanced Concepts. So let's talk for a minute before we get started about the situation that we currently find ourselves in. The last few decades have seen incredible new technologies deployed in conflict zones all around the world. This year, in fact, marks the 30th anniversary of Desert Storm. This conflict saw the GPS system make its combat debut as a powerful new precision tool in the hands of tactical units, enabling them to successfully navigate through the vast deserts of Iraq and Kuwait. Multiple new capabilities and systems, aircraft and spacecraft alike, have come online since then. And the volume of data generated by those systems across the joint force has grown exponentially. To meet the challenges our adversaries and competitors present around the world, we must harness this data and forge new secure linkages between our systems to empower operators and commanders to make the right decisions quickly and stay inside our opponent's OODA loops. Last fall, the Department of the Air Force's Rapid Capability Office was assigned management of the Advanced Battle Management System. I've talked to Mr. Walden a number of times since that assignment, and the way he likes to refer to it is somebody parked this ABMS program office in my parking lot. We're very proud in the United States Space Force to work closely with Waldo and his team to ensure that space interoperability is successfully integrated into this important work. We have a memorandum of agreement in works with the RCO to stand up an operating location here at SMC in Los Angeles to facilitate the development of ABMS space capabilities. That'll be a major factor in ensuring we stay synchronized throughout the build out of ABMS and the broader JADC2 construct. The drive to develop JADC2 and ABMS is one of the most critical programs underway in the DoD, and this is a perfect way to kick off 2021 as we look to build interconnected systems in multi-domains that give our warfighters the edge they so richly deserve. Gentlemen, I'd like to give you each a few minutes to share your thoughts before we get into the questions and answer portion of the panel. So how about we start with Mark Rasnake? Let's go with you, and then we'll move on directly to General Stapp and then Matt Cornick. Gentlemen, over to you for about 5 minutes apiece. Thanks.
Thank you, General. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to host this panel today. And I'd also like to thank our AFA hosts for giving us the opportunity to talk about JADC2 and ABMS, both very important topics as we look to the future and how we're going to conduct warfare. So just a quick background on myself. I retired back in 2015. I've been working for the Boeing company for the last little over 5 years. Been working ABMS since that time as the enterprise lead, looking to coordinate and synchronize the different business units across the company to come together to support the Advanced Battle Management System and the future Joint All-Domain Command and Control ecosystem. So from my background in the Air Force, I spent 25 years as a career air battle manager, working in both air and ground assignments around the world, conducting operations in multiple theaters. And throughout those many years, I had the opportunity to experience firsthand, if you will, the importance of BMC2 when it comes to orchestrating and synchronizing effects across the battle space. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart because it was my profession for 25 years. But as we look into the future, we know that battle space is becoming much more complex. The technology pace is rapid and it's changing literally daily. And so as we look to the future, we need to understand what those changes look like and how technology could be applied across the different domains to connect, move information, and to enable the JADC2 and ABMS visions that are necessary, like you talked about, General Thompson, that our warfighters so richly deserve. We also need to recognize that our U.S. Army counterparts with Project Convergence, as well as the U.S. Navy and Project Overmatch, they will also be a part of this discussion as they bring needed capabilities from their respective domains to enable this entire JADC2 architecture as we look forward. And we can't forget our coalition partners. We fight in joint coalition operations. So we need to understand what their contributions will be and what they will look like and how can we include them in this very complex multi-domain battle space of the future. And so when we saw the theme for this year's AFA, accelerate and innovate, from a company perspective, that is something that Boeing has been doing for decades. And so we're focused on creating the capabilities to accelerate JADC2 and ABMS for today, but also to win that future fight. And so along those lines, the things that we're investing in to enable JADC2 and help ABMS along, as well as Overmatch and Convergence, we're investing in the integration of new technologies and capabilities across all the domains. We have capabilities that literally go from subsurface all the way to space. Those include defense autonomy. Our goal is to connect and enable the warfighters to have the information when they need it, where they need it, and deliver them an information advantage, because we know data is going to be the key to success in any future joint all-domain conflict. We also are taking a very digitally advanced approach to how we do business in the future, today and in the future. We're leveraging model-based engineering and virtualization, open systems architectures, agile software development, advanced manufacturing, and then digital engineering and digital twins. I know Dr. Roper, before he left, that was two of the things he championed for many years, and we see those as game changers going forward. And it's not just through the application of aircraft, but systems and subsystems and networks, and how do you integrate all of those different capabilities together to produce the desired effects in the joint domain battle space. And so some examples of where we're going with this is recent examples. If you look at our ET7A, our KC-46A or F-15EX, our power teaming system, those are all capabilities that we leverage digital engineering and open systems architectures. And when I say we embrace that approach, we see this as the key enabler going forward to rapidly developing new technologies and making those available to the warfighter. And so as the defense customers, we know as they transform how they fight and how they plan to win in the modern era of warfare, we feel we're well positioned to support our customers with these digitally advanced and open system architecture solutions that will enable every phase of the JADC2 ecosystem. And as a company, we're fully committed to providing the latest technologies to support those integrated battle spaces of today and tomorrow, and to help the JADC2 connected warfighter close kill chains faster and smarter than ever before. Because at the end of the day, we know there's kill chains that will have to be executed. And so we want to make sure that we provide those capabilities, invest in those technologies that will enable our warfighters to do that. across a large battle space, a multi-domain battle space. And so if you think about where the chief, when he talks to the public many times, and the theme for AFA this year, accelerate and innovate. So we've taken that and we're leading with a digital mindset. And we're using the latest technologies to create those capabilities for our defense customers that is greater than the sum of their individual parts, because in the future, all of these parts have to connect and move information together seamlessly. And so we know our customers need an industry partner that's going to help them stay ahead of technologically advanced threats now and in the future, because it's just not enough to have the advantage in any one domain. They want to act seamlessly as one joint force across all domains and at machine speeds. And so we're prepared to do that and support our customers. I know my counterparts on this panel today are positioning themselves to do the same. And so we look forward to what this future joint all-domain environment is going to be and how it develops and evolves. And I look forward to your questions.
All right, thanks, Mark. Let's move on to Scott Stapp from Northrop Grumman. Scott?
All right, sir. Thank you. And again, thanks to you, sir, and to AFA for hosting this panel. JADC2, I think, is the up and coming issue for our future. And in a lot of ways, and I'll talk about it, I think it really is what Secretary Work talked about in the Obama administration as really this third offset. So a little bit about my background, because I think it really shapes the way I think about JADC2. My current role is the CTO for Northrop Grumman, but we've also attached, I'm the corporate lead for JADC2. So I am running JADC2 from the CTO office, working directly for the CEO. So my background, a 30-year Air Force guy, primarily engineering, acquisition, flight test. I'm a little bit of an anomaly because of my 30 years, 19 of it was done either joint, interagency, or inter-service. So very little Air Force time, actually. Did combatant command tour, 3 joint staff tours, OSD tour, IC tour, a Marine Corps exchange tour. The last 13 years was all special programs. So it was really dealing in the black world, which as we talk, I think that will have a huge impact on how we look at JADC2. You can't connect anything into JADC2 that you're unaware of. So connecting that across the multi-level security world is very important. So did a special programs tour in the IC, ran AQL in the Air Force, did it out of the Vice Chairman's office in the Joint Staff, and then up in OSD SAPCO, which was my last job before I left the Air Force. The other thing I ran, which again will be important here, was I ran the JROC for 2 years, and how you look at requirements and how we move forward. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second as well. I've been out for about almost going on 7 years. I've been with Northrop Grumman the whole time. I did 3 years running R&D down in one of our sectors. I then did 3 years as a business unit, working obviously with you, General Thompson, running what we call space resiliency and rapid prototyping. And then have been up in the corporate office now about a whole 3 months as the CTO and the lead for JADC2. What's interesting when we talk about JADC2, and I go back to kind of my joint staff time, is I was in the joint staff in 2003 and 2004, when miraculously we came up with the interoperability KPP, and then the following year in 2004, a net ready KPP. And those KPPs were really, in essence, this first look at what we needed as a joint connected force. We really just struggled to understand what that meant. And as I ended up going and running the JROC in 2011, we still had the KPPs, but 90% of the people got waivers for it because they couldn't understand how it actually applied to their program. I think what we're seeing now, and we've heard a lot this week, is this entire evolving threat scenario where we're going from what was really a more permissive, contested environment to what is really now a highly contested, peer-on-peer, great power competition. Now, during the 20 years we've been in these more permissive fights, our adversaries have had a chance to look at really how we fight and where our seams and our vulnerabilities are in our TTPs and CONOPS. They've realized our reliance on GPS, our reliance on space-based battle space awareness, and they have moved to more mobile, exotic means to defeat us. They've developed long-range systems that push us further out. And what we're starting to see is it's going to be absolutely essential. The only way for us to be effective in the future is to use a cross-service connectivity of weapon systems, information, everything. As Mark mentioned, we see in the Air Force, you see ABMS, in the Army Project Convergence, the Navy Overmatch, but JADC2 is really a connective tissue of all those activities together. In fact, I think the things that are missing right now is you're going to need to see the intelligence community play into that in a battle space awareness aspect. And I think well, my guess is you would see something out of the U.S. Space Force, because space is so incredibly important to that battle space awareness that you'll see that tied in as well. So when you look at this very large, what I'd call a government problem, what our CEO decided to do was to move this up to the corporate level, so that we're really taking a whole of company approach to what I'd call a whole of government challenge. And there's really two elements that really help us with that as the CTO. So one is it allows me overseeing the IRAD for our company and our technology development to understand those technologies that really help us make JADC2 effective, right? So, and we talked about it before, it's digital transformation, it's artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's advanced networking, it's communications and transformational computing, cyber, battle space awareness and ISR, improved battle management fusion, autonomy. As a CTO, I actually have an ability to move IRAD and technology development inside the company to ensure we're meeting those needs. The second big advantage of doing it at the top is you really can address what I'd call the non-technical or institutional issues. I think one of the biggest challenges we're going to have, and we'll probably talk about it later in the panel, is the stovepipes that have developed over time within the DoD. Is that the services have recognized the need to exchange information across services, but there are still these stovepipes that exist and make it difficult to just make it seamlessly exchanged across Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Well, and I don't think we're unique. Northrop Grumman, I think, like our other defense contractors, have tended to mirror our customers. So we have a space group that supports the Space Force. We have an air group that supports the Air Force. We have Army and Navy groups that support those. But as we do it at a company level, what it does is it allows me to break down internal stovepipes, force integration across the entire company, so that even as Air Force goes and pursues ABMS, Army Convergence, Navy Overmatch, what we're going to ensure is that as we support those elements, we will ensure connectivity across those. So as the services really try to connect, potentially at a later date, we have made it seamlessly where they can actually connect. So it's really breaking down those large stovepipes and connecting it. And then the last one is at an institutional level is multi-level security. You have to have an ability. So as part of it is those who are aware of what we call the corporate SAP governance process. I'm kind of the tie into that from Northrop Grumman as well. And it's really tying in all the special programs as well with the IC to ensure that you're looking across everything to tie it together so you don't have little pieces missing. So that's it for us.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Some great remarks there. Really appreciate it. Okay, finally, for opening remarks, let's turn it over to Dr. Matt Cornick from General Atomics. Matt?
Yeah, thank you, General Thompson. And may I also add that I'm also joining from sunny SoCal from our headquarters here in San Diego. So a couple things. So first of all, I'll say that, first of all, it's been a very, it's really our pleasure to be part of this ABMS project over the past 1 to 2 years or so. For General Atomics, that started in December of 2019 when we participated in on-ramp exercise 1. And we really got to see during that event what ABMS could be. We brought, with very little notice, a number of sensors and aircraft, capital aircraft to that event. But you could see that the spirit of experimentation was unique. It really showed you, when you get engineers in a hangar that are really working towards a common goal, that it really reminds you we're all one team. And that's the kind of attitude that we're going to need, I think, to be successful in a project as ambitious as ABMS. We continued in on-ramp exercise 2. We really dialed it up to 11 in that exercise. We brought 6 aircraft to that. And it was a mixture, it was opportunity to try new things. We had capital aircraft, we had government-owned aircraft, we had sensor feeds that hadn't before connected to, cloud infrastructure. And so we were able to demonstrate that at least a lot of our products, the Reaper being the key one, don't have to be stovepipe solutions. A lot of the sort of thinking about the Reaper is that the data kind of sits and dies in the ground station, but we were able to demonstrate during on-ramp exercise 2 that that data can be shared with the larger force, with everyone who wants it. We had a web server, gademonstration.com, that you could log into, and everyone that logged in could see a live feed of exactly what the Reaper was seeing, the MTSB turret feeds and all of that. So we kind of demonstrated that it's not so much a technology challenge. It gets to what Scott was saying, is some of the culture and a lot of the stovepipes that are intentional stovepipes, especially on the classification side. It's not necessarily a technical challenge that needs to be overcome. From our perspective, the way that we're approaching this is we see three or four kind of big opportunities or areas that we think we can contribute. The first being, we talk about data standards and waveform standards. And the common refrain is that, if you have 30 standards and you're trying to you make another one, now you have 31 standards. Now, I think in principle, you could make one, waveform to rule them all, or one data standard. But the challenge that we see there is just the bill that creates to then upgrade all those legacy systems to the new one, data standard. So we don't think the future is so much in one waveform to rule them all, or one data standard. It's more adapters, gateways, data converters, and so we're trying to position ourselves in that area. The one I'll mention real quick is gateway technology. And again, this is something that no one company can solve, because again, you're trying to connect multiple waveforms that may be proprietary, but the idea of an unmanned aircraft that can be a router and a hub and can exfil data to platforms that maybe don't have that kind of connectivity traditionally, and then that platform is doing all of the data conversions and all the gateway functionality. I think that's an area that our company sees ways that we can help there. And by the way, by doing that, you also allow these legacy platforms access to future capabilities like Starlink, right? So if you want a legacy platform to be able to talk Starlink, you could put Starlink on that platform, or you could have it talk through a gateway system that has that kind of connectivity. The other area is, in software-defined platforms. I think, it's especially important, I think, for ABMS, because a large architecture like that, where everyone's talking to everyone, all sensors are talking to all shooters, could quickly, in a way that a large number of gears could get kind of jammed up, and you really need to be flexible. You need to be able to redefine things on the fly, because a lot of this you're going to learn on the fly, kind of how these things are going to connect. So to the extent that's possible, having software-defined systems. And so for us, that means that future platforms, future aircraft are going to be more like this, like a smartphone, where every app that you create on the smartphone has access to all of the sensors and output devices on the cell phone. It has access to the 5G modem, the Bluetooth modem, the NFC modem, the accelerometers, the microphones, the camera, all of that. Any app instantly has access to all of those devices. And by making the platform software defined, you enable the ability of kind of what Mark was saying earlier, is kind of how do you turn on a dime? How do you update systems inside the adversary's OODA loop? And I think the answer is going to be software, as opposed to hardware modularity, which a lot of our platforms today are hardware modular. You can bolt boxes on, and we think we have a very flexible platform in that sense. And then the third area is if you look really far in the future, to having disaggregated unmanned systems that eventually have the capability of replacing legacy systems. And so if you look at systems like JSTARS, AWACS, P8s, rivet joint systems, obviously incredibly powerful capabilities, incredibly important for the nation. But as you look towards the kind of threats that Mark was talking about, you can do so much more with a disaggregated set of autonomous agents. And for us, that means heterogeneous unmanned platforms that plug into a network in the same way, independent of what type of platform they are. And the ability to improve your situational awareness by having different perspectives, better track accuracies, better information to make a decision about what the intent of a threat is. And you also have a lot more resilience when you do that, and you greatly complicate the adversary's decision-making process when you're that diverse, distributed, and resilient. So those are the three areas in which we're focused. And I will say GA is very much in line with the idea of experimentation. I think you do need a solid foundation on the architecture, but then maturing that through experimentation is going to be important, because I think a standard systems engineering approach is just so hard when you get to something as complex as ABMS. You can't write down the high-level requirements and decompose those very easily. It's hard for a human to know, should these platforms have a long-range sensor, or should I have fewer, smaller platforms with smaller sensors? It's just such a complex trade space. That's where you get into digital engineering and model-based engineering. And so, again, just, in my role within the company is I lead the modeling and simulation group, the mission analysis group within General Atomics to bring those kind of future systems engineering approaches to bear for ABMS. So I'll leave it there. I'm sorry if I went over time.
No, Matt, that was great. Thanks very much. Special bonus points for the dial it up to 11 Spinal Tap reference.
Oh, yeah.
And rule them all Lord of the Rings reference. We were all taking notes, so we'll expect more as we proceed throughout the panel today.
I'll do my best.
Hey, so seriously, thanks to all of you for those opening thoughts. As a reminder to our audience, just use the Q&A button on your screen to send in your questions. We're very excited to hear what's on your minds, and I'm sure these gentlemen will knock it out of the park. As I look now, we got 3 or 4 questions that are either already in or in the process of being loaded. So let's get on to the discussion. First up, we'll go to Mark Rasnake from Boeing. And Mark, over the last decade, we've seen a really strong push by China for companies like Huawei to set technology standards for things like 5G and artificial intelligence. Given the importance of advanced technology to our JADC2 vision, how are you and Boeing approaching the issue of new standards, especially for dual military and commercial technologies?
Thanks, Gerald. That's a great question. And it's a challenging question when you think about the scope of what we're talking about. If you look at the growth of 5G around the world, if you also look at the pace of change when it comes to just machine learning, artificial intelligence, communications writ large. We're now moving into communications where we're using the cloud. We're accelerating change at such a rapid pace. The question is always, how do the standards keep up with the pace of change? And so when you look at the commercial side, they actually have a number of standards. They actually define many standards. If you think about it from the early part of the internet, IP, Internet Protocol, XML. We've got Open Geospatial Consortium and some of those standards. Those were started on the commercial side, and then the military eventually adopted them. And so when we start looking at how do we take this in the future, particularly when you look at potential peer threats and how they play in these same commercial spaces. So from a Boeing perspective, we play in both the military and the commercial sectors. We have business in both areas. And so we have a lot of experience in taking a look at commercial standards and how we could potentially apply them for a military application. And so right up front, one of the first things we look at is how widely adopted is this standard? Is this something that's new? Is it emerging? Is it partially adopted in certain segments of the commercial business space, but not all? And then not only do we take a look at how it started, how it's being developed. But we also take a look at this standard from a perspective of product security. A lot of folks may not know the commercial side does have high security applications, very high security applications, particularly when you think about the world's banking, the global banking system rides on commercial standards. It rides on commercial networks. Those don't leverage DoD networks. So they do have a lot of capabilities that we can learn from, a lot of standards that we can leverage. But at the same time, from a military perspective, we do business obviously in a different manner than the commercial side. And so as we start to look at those standards, we need to assess them through the eyes of a product, from a product security perspective. Are the standards, do they enable product cybersecurity? The way the code is being written to support that standard, does it ensure that it minimizes backdoors and potential threats, insider threats, those kind of things? And then if those meet the standards, then obviously we can take those and look at them for potential adoption on the military side. Now, the military has a number of ways that they look at including commercial standards. And one of those ways, and it's a way that we're very familiar with, and I know my panelists are also familiar with it as well, is there's consortiums. I think of the OMS, UCI, the Open Mission Systems, and the Universal Command and Control Interface Consortium, of which you have government, FFRDCs, and industry participating in a collaborative environment to take a look at the commercial standards that are there, and then how can we apply and adapt them to the military, to a military application that potentially can be used across a wide range of capabilities, such as OMS and UCI. You also see the Open Communication Standard. That's another consortium, FACE for the Army. So there's a number of ways that we can take and look at these different commercial standards, look at them through a very different framework, if you will, and then bring them in on the military side as part of a consortium, which we fully support. We like the consortium approach because it ensures when we take a look at that commercial standard and we bring it over to the military side, we can find common ground and agreement between the industry partners, so we can focus on really delivering a capability that works much more so than just the interfaces and some of the other pieces, some of the lower hanging fruit, if you will. We really want to all deliver capabilities that matter, that our customers need and will be able to use. And so that's why those standards, how they can play an important part of that. So from a company perspective, we are familiar with both sides. We use both sides on a daily basis, but we do believe in a very structured process for assessing those commercial standards and how they could be potentially used on the military side by using consortiums and other means to assess their value.
Hey, Mark, thanks very much. That was a great answer. I particularly like the concept of assessing standards on the commercial side or from some of our partners, and then transitioning them into JADC2. It gives you kind of the opportunity for a best of breed or best athlete kind of an evaluation for something as important as ABMS and JADC2. So let's move on to our second question here, and we'll pass this one. How about to Scott Stapp? So Scott, you've worked on both the commercial and the military side. From industry's perspective, are there cultural or institutional challenges to integrating JADC2 and ABMS that the government should be addressing and is not?
No, it's all good. We're all, no.
Okay, that's a C- answer. Try better.
That's more like a D, maybe an F. No, there's a ton, and we talked a little bit. Common data standards is one, and I agree completely with Mark's answer that we have a consortium right now, obviously UCI OMS, that actually has done a really good job of looking at those standards. I think pulling together what I'd almost call a JADC2 consortium, where industries pull together with the government and FFRDCs to look at all the different complex problems, because you could solve it for a service, but actually not solve it for the greater joint force. And I think we have to be very careful about developing solutions that, and again, not that, I think connecting the intra-service is more important right now, connecting that whole service together, but eventually it does have to connect across the joint force of making sure we don't put any hooks in place that don't allow that to occur. So I think coming up with those standards and doing it at a joint level, I think is really important. I think multi-level security is absolutely critical. When we look at what the critical elements, especially in a highly contested environment, when you look at the elements that play in that world, whether it's space, air, others, a lot of those reside in either a TSSCI world or a SAP-SAR world or a reserve world. And making sure those are connected, you can't connect, as I said earlier, what you don't know about. So in that space, I will tell you, there's been more progress in that than I would have ever imagined, even when I was the OSD SAPCO. So DAF RCO has really been paving the way for all that stuff. They've done some amazing work in what was called is called Air Force Cross Domain Collaboration Initiative. It gets industry involved at a high level. It's not, and none of us are worried about it getting into proprietary, but it gets you an understanding of all the things being built in the architecture. So even when you look internally to what you're doing, you have some idea of what else you're going to need to tie into the enterprise over time. And they have really, really paved the way. What we need to do is probably go beyond that, and we need to tie in the intelligence community as you look at battle space awareness from space. Those are really the front end sensors in really an OODA loop. I think tying it all together, and I kind of mentioned it before, is really, I believe this is Secretary Work's vision of what the third offset was, which was if you could connect everything together real time, really fast, right? So when you see a threat, 5 seconds later, it's taken care of, and you're operating 2 to 3 orders of magnitude faster in an OODA loop than your adversary, you are there. So on the institutional side, obviously we've seen barriers with the service. I think it's incumbent upon us to look across those. It does get tough because when you look at how the services run their TTPs and ConOps, we don't run common TTPs and ConOps. And when we've worked with a variety of different services, sometimes the answer comes back. They'll want us to look 20 to 30 years into the future on the technologies and the capabilities and what we could connect together. But their concern is, I don't want to change my TTPs or ConOps. Well, it's kind of pointless to do that technology change if you're not willing to change your TTPs and ConOps. So I think a lot of that, when you look at what Shotgun Browning and others are really, he's doing in Assault Breaker 2, I think industry can help connect the enterprise together. I think the government has to figure out that if we magically connected everything together and every sensor was connected to every shooter and battle management node, because there will be multiple battle management nodes. And it's not that every data goes to every shooter, the right data goes to the right shooter of choice. When you get all that connected, here's a question. If you have let's just make it up, a penetrating asset, a B2 or something in bad guy land, and he has all sorts of threats he can say, some he can take care of, some he can't, but he has connectivity to an Aegis cruiser or an Army IBCS node who has long range fires. Can that guy pull a trigger and pull a weapon off one of those systems and take care of that target? And that level of command and control and battle management is something the DoD is going to have to work through at a combatant commander and service level, which is who owns which pieces? Do you have a certain piece allocated almost in a lottery that others can pull from? These are back for my self-defense in other cases. But I think if you connect everything together, they still have to work through the government issue of how do you actually battle manage, command and control that connectivity. And again, I wouldn't expect anything different. This is very new, but right now it tends to get entrenched into, well, this is the way I do it today. And I think we have to have abilities to look at, just game playing, war gaming. What would it look like in the future if you could do this? And then that will help industry look at what are the most important things to connect together first and fastest. And I think that those pieces, and I think honestly, I think industry, this is the critical time to have a very tight relationship, industry to government to FFRDC, all working together to look at how you solve this problem. Because some of it is technical, but none of it, at least that I've seen, is cosmic. A lot of it is how do we work through some of the more policy issues that actually are changeable. And sir, I know you've talked to others about it. When everything is sapped at the highest level and nobody can see it, it's hard to connect it into the force. But I think there's a step between that and desapping. Right? I think there's intermediary steps that can make it effective, and you just get a broader audience included to actually take some level of risk with that.
Hey, Scott, that was a really great answer. Thank you. You know, you mentioned expanding JADC2, if you will, or components of it to the intelligence community earlier in your answer. We have had a question come in about thoughts on coordination, synchronization, deconfliction with our multinational, with our allies, and with other parts of the interagency. And so we'll keep going here. I'll let your mind click on that one, but I would be interested in how you think industry can help bring in parts of the interagency and some of our allies to participate in JADC2 and ABMS. But I'll come back to you on that, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I tell you what, let's move on to how about a question for Matt? Matt, over the past 2 decades, we've seen incredible growth in startups and small businesses offering unique technologies with applications in both the air and space domains. How are the larger defense primes partnering with small and non-traditional companies to develop solutions for JADC2 and ABMS?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So, you know, I guess GA internally, we see ourselves as more of a medium-sized defense company. We're kind of in the middle there. Well, we're, you know, 10 times smaller than the, you know, the Raytheons and the Lockheeds of the world, but we are 10 times bigger than a lot of other companies that are involved. So there's absolute, I mean, we partner with small companies every day, you know, more than I can mention here. And I can talk a little bit about how that's changed with ABMS. You know, typically the partnership there is that that small company has a particular disruptive or innovative technology that we think together can help the nation, right? So between our technology and their technology, we can do some integration and help the warfighter. And so typically we'll look at you know, small defense companies, but also non-defense companies will sometimes, especially now with ABMS, we're moving in the direction of bringing in technologies from small companies that where the intended purpose wasn't necessarily a defense purpose. And then the types of partnerships range all across the board. It's very much case by case. You know, it ranges from you know, joint proposals, joint IRAD. Sometimes it's just a sub-K or vendor relationship. And then in other cases, we think a very tight integration makes the most sense. And if that really tight integration makes sense on both sides, it can sometimes lead to an acquisition. We've made a number of those over the past year. So I think under ABMS, what we've seen is more ad hoc partnerships. And it gets to something I had alluded to before, which is that an element of ABMS is experimentation. And when you do that and you get small and big companies working together, sometimes you don't even need to know who's who. It's just you got all these engineers with gadgets and you're trying to put them together in the best way to achieve the desired effect. And so, you know, just as one example, in on-ramp exercise 2, there was a company called Chooch AI. And Chooch AI has a defense element, but, you know, they also have a commercial side and they bring, you know, machine learning algorithms to the table. And they had a number of real-time implementations. And in a very short period of time, you know, weeks, we were able to integrate that edge processing, you know, their processing hardware and algorithms on our platforms to do edge-based, you know, classification, tracking, and combat, or I guess they call positive ID of certain threats, and then just send back the relevant data, right? And so the idea that we had our platform sending just the track and classification data back to a cloud where any shooter that wanted to subscribe to that information could get access to it, and putting that all together in a short order with a small company is, I think, a model that we're going to want to keep going, because I think good things came out of that. One other partnership I'll mention is, you know, this, as we think about combining different domains, there's 2 domains in particular that synergize really well, and that's air and space. And in particular, over the past couple of years, we've been working with a company called Capella that is developing LEO satellites to do SAR imaging. And just like a lot of these cases, they bring a really important disruptive technology to the table. And, examples are that, by working with us, they get access to certain program of records that, and so we're integrating that capability into, Reaper ground stations so that the operator gets the best ISR, the best context to execute their mission as possible. And so it's feeding in space feeds along with air feeds into one operational picture that allow them to have the best chance at success. So those are a few examples, and I expect that to grow, not even stay at the high level that it's at, but to continue to grow over the next few years.
Yeah, Matt, thanks very much. I particularly resonated with your concept of tapping into and leveraging innovation in the U.S. industrial base. Once again, just as I was about ready to say, hey, how about a space example? You rolled in there with the Capella thing. So you saved yourself, diving save there at the end. Thank you very much. Okay, so it's been said that, and Mark, I'm going to kick this one to you. It's been said that ABMS and JADC2 has a communications problem, right? That the Department of Defense and our industrial-based partners are not articulating exactly what ABMS and JADC2 will be able to achieve in terms of stitching together warfighting capabilities for the nation. That may have, a part of that failure to communicate may have resulted in, the large ABMS hit in the 21 NDAA and a number of quite a bit of media coverage about how we're failing to make a connection with our comm plan, so to speak. Does industry, and Boeing specifically, have any ideas on how the team can better communicate about this really important capability for the industrial base and for our warfighters across the planet?
That's a great question, General. So we've seen a lot of press reports talking about ABMS. The challenge with ABMS and JADC2 both is they're very large, and it's not a program specific, but it's going to be a number of programs. And how do you connect those programs together? How do you move information? It's like Scott and Matt both have talked about. This is something that's very, very complex. It's not an easy story to tell when you're trying to talk about moving electrons back and forth between different platforms from air to space, ground, surface, subsurface. So when it comes to messaging, and really because I will be honest with you, industry is ready to help. Industry wants to help. We want to lean in and support in every area we can. So when it comes to clear messaging, one of the things that helps us align internally, and I'm not going to speak for the others here, but I'm going to speak strictly for Boeing, is to make sure that we have a very clear understanding of the direction and your priorities. So each year there's a fiscal year budget that comes out, and we know there's priorities within the budget, but what are your priorities that you're leaning toward this year? There's some priorities, obviously, they're more important than others. And so what is your foundational element that you're looking to build to enable ABMS and JADC2? There's 7 categories and there's 28 different product lines within the current construct. Of those categories and product lines, which ones are prioritized more than the others? And it goes back to what Scott was talking about earlier, and Matt, when you start taking a look at the totality of ABMS and JADC2, you talk about looking at just the big primes, but also small business. And you're trying to figure out exactly what's the right combination to go out and deliver the right capability to the warfighter. You have to start looking at, again, what are the priorities? Is it artificial intelligence? Is it machine learning? Is it a communication capability? So the areas where I think the messaging could help industry is very clearly what are the priorities. For this year, these are the areas we're going to focus on and what we're going to engage industry on. How that helps us is then it helps us to position internally IRAD, engineers, and the appropriate people to go out and talk to the right small businesses, to pull the team together to go out then and deliver the capability that you need to enable your JADC2 and ABMS visions.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Really well stated. I like the clear messaging point, and I think we all collectively need to work harder at that so people understand what, as Scott Stapp has referred to a couple times here, is really a third offset capability in terms of integrating our warfighting capabilities. So let me go back to Scott here, and I previewed him on a question earlier about coordination, synchronization, and deconfliction with our allied partners around the planet and our whole of government or interagency partners. What parts of JADC2 and ABMS do we need to be making sure that we stay very closely connected to them with?
So with the interagency, I think 100% of it. I think they tend to be the front end. They tend to be the front end sensing piece. When you talk sensor to shooter, a lot of that in the interagency tends to be the front end sensing piece that you really have to have tied in. You absolutely also want your coalition partners tied in. Here's what I tell you, and this is why I think it becomes a multi-level security issue. And again, I'm going to put, back in the old SAPCO days, right? Most of the things we protect are about sources, methods, and programs. You want to protect those, the knowledge of, and what they do. If I had a magic box that I can feed data from every system into it, unclassified, collateral, secret to TS, TSSCI, SAPSAR, and then reserve, I feed it all into a box, I blend it up with a blender, I can usually kick that out at a secret collateral level. So when you're allies, if we can actually concentrate on ingesting the data into a way where you can actually fuse the data to what's important, which is in a warfighting scenario, it's target quality data. You actually fuse it together, process it down, probably using some level of AIML so you get the least data out. You can push it to anybody, probably including your allies. But we first have to be able to ingest it in the same place. Right now, it's very difficult to ingest TSSCI and SAPSAR into the same place without having accreditations for the same thing. And it's really more of a policy issue than it is a technology issue or an ability to work with our allies or interagency. It's looking at that security construct and deciding, well, hey, mixing it, is it really a security question or is it a risk calculus question? And hey, people who are TSSCI and IC, it's very similar to being SAPSAR on the DoD. We'll call them, quote, almost equivalent. If you're cleared to one, we'll work it and we'll expedite it. And therefore you can start pulling that stuff together. But right now, to do accreditations, whether it's an IT system, to get clearances, those are the long pulls that are going to take us the time. Once you get it in and blend it together, I'm convinced you can kick it out at a much lower level.
Great, perfect. Thank you very much. I did. That part about the interagency just really resonated with me. Thank you. Okay, so Matt, we're coming back to you. Earlier in the conversation, you talked about data and waveforms and software-defined radios. And so let's kind of talk about the threats to those things. So in 2019, this is from our audience, there was an executive order to mitigate and harden mission-critical systems from EMP, electromagnetic pulse strikes. What steps should we be taking to lead this effort for the C4ISR community, and how can industrial suppliers assist the primes in this effort?
Yeah, thank you for the question, General. I have to say I'm not the most qualified person to answer an EMP question, but I can talk a little bit about.
Sorry, Matt, you put doctor in front of your name, so we just assumed you were.
Just assumed, exactly. Well, let me talk a little bit about resilience, if I could, from maybe a different perspective than the EMP perspective specifically. What we see is that, what commercial industry is doing is very different from a resilience and security perspective than what the DoD has traditionally done, which is very closed systems on the DoD side. The more closed, the better. The more passwords you have to enter to get in, the better. Commercial industry is a little bit different. I mean, everything is open. The more open source something is on the commercial side, generally, the more secure it is, because you have so many different people looking at it to ensure that there aren't vulnerabilities. So how do we get, and that takes a certain level of, you need to get to a certain size of a community that's kind of all looking at your software systems to ensure that they're resilient before before you can achieve that through open systems. But again, that's something ABMS can enable, because now it's not just one office in the Air Force or one contractor that's looking at that. It becomes, there are foundational software elements to ABMS in the future, whether it's a gateway piece of software or whatever it is, or an MLS piece of software, that multiple services, multiple industry, members are looking at. And, maybe there is a way to use that open source approach and still have the resilience that we're used to in typical very closed stovepipe systems, because somehow you have to get around that stovepipe nature. And there's very often a balance between how open a system is and how secure it is. But industry seems to have figured it out. They have open and secure systems, and I think we need to move in that direction. I'm sorry I didn't answer the EMP question, but hopefully that was related enough to suffice.
That was great, Matt. Thanks very much. And in the general sense, resiliency is probably the better way to talk about it, simply because that's multi-threat, not just a singular kind of threat, particularly to space systems and air systems. Okay, so we're coming up on the end of our time. We have about 4.5 minutes left. So Matt, why don't we just stay with you for some closing remarks, and then I'll go to Scott and we'll finish up with Mark.
Okay, thanks. I'll keep it real quick. I'll just, Mark said something in the beginning that really resonated with me, which is that industry wants to help. That is the perspective that we all have. Everyone wants to help. We want to be one team. And I think to the extent that, the Air Force in particular, with the RCO and the CHOW and others, can be open about what they're trying to achieve and what they think the right architecture elements are, I think the better. They have been open, we think, but to the extent we can all act as one cohesive team, I think the better. To the extent that we do know what ABMS is going to be, we are investing in it. So for example, we have high confidence that OCS is going to be a key contributor within this ABMS architecture. And so not all, but most future IRADs within GA that deal with systems that will leverage OCS are going to be full, level 3, tier 3 compliant OCS. That's where our IRAD dollars are going to ensure that. But we're taking a little bit of a gamble because there isn't one clear definition of ABMS compatible yet. And to the extent that we can help define that or learn what that standard's going to be, I think the better, for everyone in industry and in the government. Great.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Scott?
So I think JADC2 and what they're doing in ABMS, I think it is the third offset. I think it is the thing that will actually get us back really far ahead of our adversaries. So it's something we need to keep pushing on. I think the DAF RCO and the CHOW office with Preston have done a really good job. They are ahead of everybody else in the government and have really got at this on an accelerated path. So when the chief talks about accelerated change, I think they're doing that. I think we just need to help get that pushing. It's a hard problem. So it's understandable we don't have all the answers today. It's going to take a long time, and it's going to take industry's help. And what I can tell you from Northrop Grumman is we are taking, our CEO is invested in this. So, we are taking a whole company approach to this entire government challenge. And I think that's what's going to take to tie all the moving pieces together to really meet this challenge.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Okay, Mark, final word.
All right. General, thanks again for hosting this panel. Again, I want to thank AFA for giving us this opportunity to come in, and my panel members. It's been a great discussion. But it's like we've talked about, this is not an easy problem to solve. But I agree with Scott, it is a third offset. It is the future way of warfare. It's how our military gets a decisive advantage going into any future conflict. And so how we figure this out as an industry government team is absolutely critical to achieving success. Working together across with both big primes, small business, all of us coming together, understanding what each of us brings to the table and how we can knit those together to provide the capabilities that our warfighters need is going to be the key for all of us to succeed. Because considering the size of this battle space, there's enough business for everyone. But we need to work together to make this successful, not just for us, but for more importantly, our customers. Many of us who are future warfighters understand that very clearly. And so again, I want to thank you, and I want to wish everyone a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Man, there were a lot of questions that we didn't have a chance to get to. Some good ones on digital engineering, some additional ones on human capital. But I thought we covered the waterfront here in a lot of the different aspects, industry and government wise, on JADC2 and ABMS. I'd just like to thank our AFA partners for hosting the virtual conference. Thanks to everyone online who joined us, and everybody have a great day. Aim high and Semper Supra out here.
Thanks.